So, good morning, Boker Tov, on this fine Sunday morning. Let me shut the ringer off so it doesn't disturb us over here. It's Erev Pesach, it's right before Passover, and as such, Baruch Hashem, in every one of our homes, there's so much going on, as well as here at the synagogue. I will right away begin with saying, if you don't have shmura matzah for Passover, or you do not have a place to be for the Seder, or you need other assistance with regards to Passover. As someone mentioned to me this morning, Passover is probably a time where the most, businesses make the most income during this holiday, Jewish holiday. But if you are on the other side where you're struggling, you're welcome to reach out, and we shall be there to assist you. Okay, so this class typically is sort of a Passover 101, and even a Passover 101, a class of this time frame, even though we don't rush, but we still have a time limitation. So a class like this is limited in what we could share, but nevertheless, we'll try to do a couple of basics over here and beyond, as we titled the class. If you have questions, you could please post them on the comments as we're giving the class. If I will notice them and I feel it could be addressed, I will gladly answer your questions. For example, does your pet have to be sold for Passover? These are questions that a rabbi gets and so on. So you are welcome to send these comments, and I will try to answer if I can. So let's first start off with a mitzvah. We're giving some charity, so we could elicit over here Hashem's blessing for our class over here, for our Torah lecture today, discussion, together with my good friends over here. And we always begin with a bracha on the coffee. If you have your own coffee, say a bracha with me. If not, please answer Amen. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh bidvaro. Okay, yeah, pretty good. So let's begin with Passover 101. Judaism in general, and mitzvot, commandments, is, I guess, maybe like an onion, meaning there is a core and there are many layers to it. And we have to remember what is the core and what are the layers. And while the layers can be important, but sometimes people might latch on or be meticulous in only the layers and forget about the core. And that's not what is expected of us. Every single layer, most layers have significance, and but the core is where it all comes from. So the same thing is with Jewish holidays. So to give an example, we all love on Hanukkah to eat latkes or donuts. Now that is a layer. It's a beautiful custom and it's a cherished custom, but that's not the core of Hanukkah. The core of Hanukkah is not latkes or donuts. The core of Hanukkah is the mitzvah associated with Hanukkah, which is the lighting of the menorah, recognizing the miracle that God performed for our forefathers or ancestors, through the Maccabees, defeating the Greeks who did not allow us religious freedom. So you have to remember what the core is. And the same thing when it comes to, Passover. There are certain things that have become sort of culturally Jewish, which maybe are not even customs. And if they're not customs, like buying, let's go back to Hanukkah. To give an example, one of the things that have become part of Hanukkah is to give gifts on Hanukkah. I don't even know if there's a proper Jewish source for gifts. The best of my knowledge, it comes from non-Jewish behavior. The Jewish custom is Hanukkah gelt, to give Hanukkah gelt, and there was a specific reason for that. But even that is a custom. So when it comes to Passover, there's a Jewish, maybe cultural, developing custom about brisket at the Seder. That is definitely not a custom that's mentioned in Jewish law, while there is a mitzvah to have a festive meal with meat and other delicacies, but those are part of the most outer layers, not the mitzvah of having a meal, but perhaps to have your brisket. Now, if you love brisket, then by all means, although there are many who don't have meat at the Seder table, as not to mistake it for the Paschal lamb, but regardless, it is a mitzvah to have a festive meal. But let's not forget what are the basic mitzvahs of the night, the biblical mitzvahs, and let's go to and then from there we will expand on some meaning over here. Okay, so, the Seder night. Let's talk about the three main biblical mitzvahs associated with Passover specifically. Now, let's see if you know what that is. I'll give 10 seconds for you to respond over here. Tell me, what are the three biblical commands, associated specifically with Passover? 10, 9, 8. L'chaim. Okay, so the first and most known biblical mitzvah, core mitzvah associated with Passover is, we'll first talk about the don'ts and the do's. Every relationship, I think I mentioned this last week. I asked a young teenager, what does Passover mean to me? It means not eating matzah. Okay, fine. I mean, not eating pizza. We understand that that's not the core of Pesach. However, there is a biblical command not to eat chametz on Pesach, not to eat leavened bread. Absolutely. Okay, so that is a core associated with Pesach. No leavened bread. So that's mitzvah number one. And that entails many details and over time has developed many areas of observance as to protect from the basic mitzvah. So, as mentioned in the past, the Torah says you can't have any leavened bread, and not only can't you eat it, you can't have any benefit from it, and you can't even own it. And that has become the Jewish law, that you have to get rid of all your chametz. However, since it's even a problem to have a Pesach, or what's called chametz dishes that have absorbed chametz, if you made pasta or other dishes that you bake challah and so on, and they absorb some of the chametz. So even the dishes you would have to get rid of, and therefore what we have come up years ago is that we sell our chametz to a Gentile, because the Torah specifically says it can't be yours. But if you sell it to somebody who does not have the obligation of keeping the laws of Passover, then it's not yours, and therefore you do not violate that that prohibition, although you still have to lock it up, because even if it's not yours, you still are not allowed to eat it or derive any benefit. It's only the prohibition of not having in your possession that you can resolve with this selling of chametz, but not the eating or benefiting. That doesn't. The Torah does not give that condition or limitation that it's only if it's yours. No, so you cannot eat someone else's pizza on Pesach. So that's one biblical obligation which has many sort of parts and which has stressed out many Jewish mothers, etc., because we try to make sure, or we make sure, that there is no chametz anywhere to be found in places where you might be going on Pesach. So all the rooms, and perhaps it is reasonable to say that that is where spring cleaning the world over has become common practice during this time of the year. Okay, that's the don'ts. Now let's talk about the two to-dos on Pesach, which are core to Pesach night. The two mitzvahs, as already one has answered, there are two biblical mitzvahs. There's many things we do at the Seder. But the two biblical mitzvahs that we fulfill, unique Passover biblical mitzvahs, is the eating of matzah, which is the biblical mitzvah of the night, and it is the telling the story of Pesach. So let's talk about that so that we know exactly what we need to do on Pesach night. And this is very important because people make the mistake. I've spent much time talking to people and they don't understand or they sometimes confuse what the biblical matzah is versus the commercial matzah that you buy on the market. In order to fulfill the biblical mitzvah of matzah, and this is very important, so please pay attention, there are several conditions that need to be met. And this is not just sort of a layer of the night, but this is part of the core mitzvah of the night. And without that, you don't fulfill the mitzvah. So, as mentioned in the past, matzah is the only food in the Jewish diet that God says, I want you to eat this particular food. There's no other food that exists today. Not gefilte fish, and not sushi, and not any other types of food. Matzah is the only food. So let's do it right. Especially to go a little bit beyond the basic, the Zohar, the Jewish Bible of Kabbalah, tells us that matzah has the power. It's called mechla de meimenusa and mechla de asvos. It's called food of faith and food of healing. It has, just like any other medicine you might take or food you might take that has certain powers within it, matzah has the power to heal. And matzah has the power to enhance our faith, and perhaps they're both connected, because when you have faith, you elicit blessing for healing. So especially those who maybe have, sadly, to deal with illness, it's even more important to eat the matzah right, although it's important for all of us. And thank God you should be healthy and continue to be healthy. You don't want to wait until someone in the family or someone you know is ill and say, okay, do it right. We should all do it right because this is God's command on Pesach. So, what is the conditions in order to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah? Not just the cultural experience of matzah, but God's command to us as a people, and that we've been doing for 3,500 years. A couple of things. Chocolate-covered matzah is not biblical matzah. And I'll explain in a moment. Even salt matzah is not proper matzah. In order to fulfill your mitzvah of matzah, the night of Passover, you have to have a certain measurement, which is a kazayas, because every biblical mitzvah has a measurement, no different than the dose the doctor gives you when you're taking medication. If you don't take the dose, it's not effective. There's a biblical God-instructed dose in order to fulfill your obligation with matzah. That's a kazayas. Depending, and that has to do with weight, volume, and or mass. I would say volume. So on the standard round shemura matzahs, it's about 2/3 of a matzah. It depends again on the thickness of the matzah. To make sure you do it right on a biblical mitzvah, have an extra bite or two. That's one condition. And number two, you cannot interrupt while you're eating the matzah. You cannot, take a drink of water. You cannot schmooze. You have to eat the matzah without interruption. From when you said the blessing, alachilat matzah and the hamotzi, you have to have that entire amount without interruption. Number three, I know this is technical stuff, but it's important. Number three, the mitzvah of eating matzah is after dark. I know there are people, because of the kindalach and because of the grandchildren, or because it's hard for you to eat late, so you start your Seder at 6 o'clock in the evening. You have not fulfilled your obligation unless it's after dark. Here in South Florida, it's probably around 8:20 or something like that. Which means that if for whatever reason you start your Seder early, although I recommend that you don't start early, if for whatever reason you start early, at least the obligation of eating matzah should be done after dark. Doesn't matter. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. It does matter. But if, again, You cannot stay up late. You're not well, whatever it might be. Make sure to have at least this measurement and how you do the matzah before you go to bed to fulfill the biblical obligation. Also, as mentioned before, chocolate-covered matzah is not the matzah to fulfill your obligation. It has to be matzah that is only flour and water. Otherwise, you're having other things that dilutes the purity and the taste of matzah, which is problematic in Jewish law. And according to some, you do not fulfill your obligation, which means you could have chocolate-covered matzah that's kosher for Passover throughout the entire Pesach, but that's not your fulfillment of the mitzvah. If you're having chocolate-covered matzah or any other exciting matzah or matzah and butter or whatever it might be, it is no different than eating potatoes on the night or eating chicken. It's all fine and good as a delicious food. But to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, you need to have, depending on the size of your matzah, a third or maybe a half of matzah. If it's the machine matzah, it's probably more like an entire matzah without interruption, after dark, without any other ingredients, without salt, without avocado, without margarine put onto the matzah to fulfill the mitzvah. Once you fulfill the mitzvah, you can have whatever matzah you like as long as it's kosher for Passover. I hope that is clear. If you have any questions, you are welcome to ask. Okay. That's one of the biblical mitzvahs of the night. Very important. And it's a core part of the night. Then there are other layers. We eat more matzah to remember different things. We have the afikoman. We have multiple pieces of matzah. But at the very least, don't forget to fulfill this biblical obligation. Okay, let's move on. What is mitzvah number 2? I'm not going to review the entire Seder. For that, look into your Maxwell Haggadah or Publix Haggadah or Chabad Haggadah. There's so many beautiful Haggadahs where you could see instructions and commentary and alle gute Sachen, all wonderful stuff. What is the next biblical unique mitzvah of the night? And as we know, that is what we call the Haggadah. What does Haggadah mean? Haggadah means, from the word Magid, means to tell the story, the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the story of our leaving, of our Exodus, leaving Mitzrayim. That is the other biblical mitzvah of the night. The Haggadah and everything that we talk about on this night is a biblical obligation. And here there are various opinions of how one fulfills this obligation, since it's a mitzvah to mention our going out of Egypt every single day of the year. What is unique about this night? So here it is interesting that there are various opinions in the great Rishonim, the great early commentaries, of what is the unique details of how to fulfill the mitzvahs specifically on Passover night. Two of the answers that are given is that throughout the year it's enough to mention on Passover night because we want to experience and relive the leaving of Mitzrayim. We have to elaborate, we have to discuss in detail, but to use the words of the Seder, of the Haggadah that we say on the Seder night, that Kol hamar beli yisapeh b'tzias Mitzrayim areizah meshubach, the more you articulate and you discuss and you share the story of Passover throughout the night of Pesach, areizah meshubach is praiseworthy. So this is some of the, now that's answer number one. Another answer, and this is an important answer, the difference between the night of Pesach versus all year round when there's an obligation to mention the story of the Exodus, is on the night of Pesach, it has to be b'derech shayla v'tshuva. The night of Pesach, it says we have our kindalach. They ask, yish'olcha bincha, when your children ask, and we answer, and that's why we have the 4 sons. So the night of Passover, to fulfill the mitzvah properly, it's done in a way of question and answer. If you don't have, even if for whatever reason you don't have your children at your Seder table because they're at their in-laws or whatever it might be, even then you ask yourself, and you say the Manishtana, because it should be b'derech shayla tshuva, but most appropriate, most properly is when you have your kindalach asking. And here it goes to an important element of education, that on Passover night, because it celebrates our birth as a nation, And the way to assure the continuity of our people is to make sure that our children are part of the story of the Exodus, which is the foundation of who we are as a people when God chose and created us as a nation. In order to make sure that that continues, we have to involve the kids, which is an interesting thing. It's the only mitzvah which the Torah specifically addresses and says, let me tell you how you go ahead and engage the kinderlach, whether it's the wise one, whether it's the wicked one, rebellious one, and so on. All other mitzvahs, we don't have that, because since the Exodus is about us being and continuing to be a nation, you must find a way to not only tell your kids, but it should be a question. When a person asks a question, it means it's of interest to them. The night of Pesach, we do so many things just to arouse the curiosity of the kids, because we want them engaged, not only following our instructions. This is what you should do. We want to engage them. We want them to be interested. We want them to be curious. We want them to internalize this experience. L'chaim. So here we have some of sort of the core and the basic obligation and experience of the night of Passover. Then we have many additions. Now, some of them are rabbinical, which are important, like the eating of the maror, the 4 cups. These are not biblical obligations, but they're rabbinical obligations. Then you have many customs, like dipping the karpas into salt water. These are customs and important. Not saying they're not important, but we should remember sort of the order and priority of things and not forget the core, especially when we talk about some of the new age customs, which a lot of times are important. And when I mean to say they're important, especially, today it's become, and I compliment this, parents, some of the customs associated with Passover, our sages have instructed us to do in order to arouse and engage the kinderlach. But some of these things, because they become part of the standard of the Seder, and we keep it that way because whatever the sages have recommended or instructed are, as we would say in Hebrew, Kodesh Kadashim, the holy of the holiest, because they were holy and great men. But because they become part of the routine, sometimes they do not arouse the curiosity of the kids. So I've seen, and we've all seen, parents, which is wonderful, have come up with creative ways of further engaging the kids, maybe to act out the 10 plagues and the like, which is wonderful, because we want to be creative. That's the theme of the night. Such an important theme is to engage the kinderlach, to engage our children, so that they have not only memories, but that it becomes real to them, and it becomes ingrained within those beautiful seeds that are developing into blossoming, fruit-giving trees later in their life. So this is part of the core, what we would call Passover 101. Now, having said that, I do want to give one sort of additional thought, a little bit of a deeper thought, and there's so much. Passover and the Haggadah is, I believe, after the Bible, is the most, after the Torah, 5 books of Moses, the most printed Jewish book, and there's commentaries and commentaries and commentaries. Every year there's new commentaries coming out. It's just incredible. I want to give one thought, and I'm sure I've shared this in the past, but this is a thought both from the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe, which comes to mind right now. A lot of beautiful thoughts. And before I say this thought, I want to give one introduction as well. People listening to this class, my good friends over here, are of various different sort of levels in their connection and practice of our beautiful heritage. Some are more at the beginner's level, some are more at the advanced level, some are at the advanced of the advanced, although this class is not, or this Torah discussion is not so much geared for the sort of higher level of Torah scholars. It's a very different type of lecture. But nevertheless, there are those of various levels who are here together with us in this Torah discussion. But I would say like this, that because the objective is not just to show our knowledge for the night, which is again important because it's a mitzvah to elaborate, make a point as your kindalach, as your children or grandchildren are at the table, make a point, and you should think about this before Passover, of 2 or 3 penetrating important ideas that you want to share with your children and grandchildren, that you want them to come away with at the Seder table. Think about a particular commentary. I know there were people, great scholars, who every single year would even share the same thought because they wanted that to be ingrained within their kindalach and grandchildren. Think about that before Passover. Maybe research something, maybe something you had. This is what I want, in addition to everything else, for my children, grandchildren to come away with. Just a side point. Now, on that note, I also want to share this very nice insight. One of the 4 sons is the Eino Yodea Lishal, the child that does not know how to ask. Now, the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe discuss these various answers based on the following question. The Eino Yodea Lishal is the last of the children. And this can be viewed, the Eino Yodea Lishal, one does not connect, this can be viewed negatively and positively. You would think that the Rasha, the rebel, the rebellious child, should be the last of the 4 children. Eino Yodea Lishal is ignorant. And one answer given to that the reason why the Eino Yodea Lishal is put last is because ignorance, to a very real degree, is actually the last and the worst situation to be in. Even a rebellious child at least has the knowledge, which is why he's rebellious. And if he does tshuva, if he repents, or he is convinced in the error of his ways, he has the tools, he has the knowledge to go ahead and do things right. But if you are totally ignorant and you've had no exposure to Jewish knowledge, to Jewish teachings, you don't even know where to go, and you don't even know what you're missing. You don't even know what you might be doing wrong. So ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is, to a real extent, the worst place we could be at, or our child, which is a encouragement and a motivator, especially here for American Jewry, that many of our kids are growing up to merely know that they are Jewish, but what that means and what you have to learn, and it's the basics, is not there, sadly. And so therefore, they don't know what they're missing, the beauty of what they're missing, the richness of what they're missing. And so that's one area that we must definitely focus and pay attention to. So that's on one explanation. Another explanation of Eino Yodea Lishal is, I believe, from the previous Rebbe, if I remember correctly, the previous Chabad Rebbe. And he says Eino Yodea Lishal represents a state. The reason why he's last is because it represents a state of apathy. Eino Yodea Lishal can be even the most religious or observant Jew, and he does it right. But Eino Yodea Lishal, a question, a real question, comes because it irks you. Something is bothering you intellectually, emotionally, so you have a question. But if you're totally apathetic, or just do things out of habit, or because I grew up doing it, you could do everything right, perfect, but you have no questions. You have nothing that in Yiddish we say as turkedir. It shakes you up a little bit. I have a question. Why? What does it mean to me? Why are we doing this? Not in a challenging way, but in a way that because this is important to me, I want to know more. But then you have the individual, and again, he could be the most knowledgeable and even observant, but Eino Yodea Lishal doesn't know to ask. He has no questions in the negative sense. I just do it. Tell me what to do. I do it. There's no struggle. There's no curiosity. There's no growth. To grow, you have questions. How do I do it differently, better? Why? Any of the and that's, in a sense, the lowest of the levels. That's an insight, one discussion of the previous Rebbe. And then, and this is what I want to conclude in our Pesach discussion over here. I have a time limitation because I have an appointment soon. There is another beautiful insight, and it's the more positive insight. And I like that because it's always nice to get a positive insight. Eino yedeya lishoel means, in a positive sense, not that he doesn't have questions, but it's in a typical sense, but it's a deeper understanding. What does it mean I don't have questions? Meaning I am so in sync. I'm so connected to whatever God wants, whatever God brings upon me, that I have no questions. I'm in total acceptance of Hashem and his ways. Not that I intellectually understand everything. Of course, I might have a question, but on a deeper emotional level, I'm at peace. I have people like that. The greatest scholars, they learn, they question, but any day Elishael, they don't have questions on the ways of Hashem, on the ways of Torah, on the ways of mitzvahs. They are in total harmony and in a deep inner soul peace, which is what Pesach is about. It's about inner freedom. And that comes about from having a true and deep understanding, appreciation, learning of Torah, prayer, deep connection. So Enia de Elishal is placed last because on a spiritual level, if you could reach this level, strive to reach this level, you're at the highest and best place a human being can reach. So that's a positive explanation of the Enia de Elishal. I love that explanation. So much more that we can share, and you're welcome to send questions even after this class. I want to wish you a wonderful Yom Tov, beautiful holiday. I think we've covered some of the basics over here, and thank you for listening. Share these words of Torah. Have a wonderful Pesach of inner freedom. Invite another person to your Seder table or to your Passover table. Show up over here and do some davening, do some prayer, whatever it might be. Enjoy your family. Bring meaning into the Pesach. It's not just about family celebration, although it is also, and that's when God told us to bring the Korban Pesach. He said it should be done as a family, highlighting the strength of our existence is within the family, and that's all very beautiful. So much that can be discussed. Have a wonderful Pesach. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing these words of Torah. Only blessing to you and your family. Sei gesund.